In this portion, I'd like to go into and discuss element separation techniques. Now, throughout this course, we've been talking about how important it is to establish good, simple images, and one of the key techniques of doing that is separating primary image elements. So it's worth a movie all on its own. I want to start with a little demonstration. Neither one of these are great images, but they really illustrate one of the techniques that I want to show you. And this is using your camera position to create separation. On the left-hand side is one of my cross-country ski poles at a human eye view, 5.6 feet, or about 5 feet, I guess, in my eyes. And over on the right-hand side is I've moved my camera down. And you can see just quickly at a glance which image is simpler, and it's the right-hand image. The reason is this crossing of high contrast edges. I'm just ruthless about trying to remove crossing of high contrast edges or minimizing their impact in my images. Because every time you cross a high contrast edge, it creates complexity. When you cross thick high contrast edges like this is a real complex area of the image. So by simply moving the camera down, we reduce this complexity right here, and you end up with a much simpler image. Plus, it's an interesting point of view as well. So we're going to look at a couple of images and talk about camera placement technique. This is an image that we've already seen, but it's such a great example. We're just moving the camera up, and this was about, 8 or 9 inches from here to there, creates this very nice separation, which simplifies the image and makes a much better composition. It also helps move the eye across the image, if you notice. This kind of stops the eye, and this kind of creates space as the eye moves across the image. So changing camera position is critical in this particular case, and it's easy to do. Here's a sequence of 3 images that I shot in Salt Lake, and I shot these specifically as examples of not paying attention to separation. Notice in each case, the head or the person is being intersected by a high contrast edge or a darker portion of the image. All 3 of these would have been nice images except for the fact of that lack of separation. And then all we need to do is change our camera position, and boom, and we end up with an image like this. Far simpler, nice separation, and notice how that subject now really stands out from the image rather than being lost without separation. So it's a really handy, very powerful, and so simple to just change the camera position. All right, what are some other techniques? Well, improving contrast with the background. Well, here's some photographs I took in Zion National Park with some flowers against the red sandstone. Notice it's low contrast, it's not much separation. Well, you can really improve this by improving the contrast with the background. You'll also notice that I zoomed in, used my have it and have it again technique we talked about earlier, but you can dramatically improve the overall look and composition of the image by making sure that you get good contrast with the background. And some other things you can do. You can use look-throughs like we have on the left, or you can use vignettes to help isolate images. These are all useful techniques. And you can even use filters. Here's an example of using a polarized filter, no polarizer on the left, polarizing filter used on the right, to create some nice separation between these 2 objects. Again, these are not particularly great images, but I wanted to use very simple examples to show you the difference between the 2 skies. So using a polarizing filter, which I always have with me when I'm shooting landscapes. All right, and one final technique, and this is a really powerful one, although a little bit more technical, and that is using depth of field to control separation. Here we have a wine glass on the hood of my SUV, and here we've got the glass in sharp focus and the background out of focus, which emphasizes the glass. And here I've just switched it, all right, where I have the background in focus and the glass out of focus. And we can use control of depth of field like this to help emphasize and separate image elements. I've got a couple of examples, and I want to emphasize the 3 components that go into controlling depth of field. And that is lens choice, plane of focus, and then f-stop. All right, in this particular case, I want low depth of field because I really wanted to isolate this iris. So what I did was I chose a lens that doesn't have a very great depth of field, a medium telephoto lens, 200 millimeters. Where did I put the plane of focus? Boom, right here on the front because I want to make sure that's the sharpest. An f-stop, a low f-stop so I don't have a lot of depth of field. Both of these, the lens choice and the f-stop, will assure that I have a limited depth of field, which throws the complex background completely out of focus, thereby dramatically simplifying the image and focusing our attention on that beautiful iris. On this image, I've got a modest depth of field. My lens choice here is a little bit shorter, 150 millimeters. My plane of focus is the waves. And my f-stop is a modest 5.6. What I was after here was not complete separation like the last image, but I wanted to make sure that this was nice and sharp because it's my primary image element. But I wanted to make sure the background was also visible, but just a little bit softer. So I used a little bit shorter lens, so I have a little bit better depth of field, and a modest f-stop, which again gives me a modest depth of field. And then finally, if I just don't want any separation at all, Then I choose a very wide-angle lens, which I know has lots of depth of field. And at first I used an 18, but it was a little bit too distorted, so I went with a 28 millimeter. Put my plane of focus about 1 foot in front of the lens, and then I had a nice high f-stop to make sure everything from foreground to background would be completely in focus. All of these techniques will help you control the separation of your images and really help you gain some more control over your composition.